Hi, everybody.
Hi, Diane. Hey, Tom.
Good afternoon.
Happy Friday. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. It's Friday.
Can't ever be down on a Friday. And I'm excited. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to get started today and learn about this often overlooked and underknown topic, succession planning. We are blessed to have our domain expert, Diane Rigatuso, here, as well as our seasoned talent advisor, Tom Callahan. So let me
Hi,
start
everybody.
with, uh,
I said hi, everybody.
Hello, Tom.
Let me start by introducing everyone to you, Diane, and just explaining how she is the domain expert. She's very experienced senior human resource leader with executive roles at Oracle, Databricks, Actian, and Skyline Enterprises. She has vast experience in designing and implementing global talent programs, benefits, succession planning, and professional growth initiatives. So if you need someone to guide organizational realignment and restructuring in collaboration with your executive leadership, she's your expert, she's your woman. And then Tom, the man below me, that is our seasoned talent advisor based in Silicon Valley. Tom has over 20 years of experience scaling teams during growth stages. He excels in executive search and resource management. He actually led the team leadership build outs for Oracle, Sonos, DoorDash. He actually pioneered the executive recruiting at Oracle's cloud computing division and has established not one, but two successful retained executive search firms. His expertise in spotting talent, potential, and guiding startups towards success makes him such a valuable strategic talent advisor, investor, and such an asset here at Recruiting from Scratch. I should say, Tom and I are both a part of the Recruiting from Scratch team. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us yet, we're a recruiting agency that excels in tech-focused talent acquisition for startups and large corporations. Our expertise spans engineering, product management, product design, and operations in flexible models, whether it be retained or containers. And I guess that brings us to me, your host, if you will. I'm Madeline, the account manager team lead at Recruiting from Scratch. So now, without further ado, let's dive into the topic today. Diane, can you break it down for us initially, for those of us who are unfamiliar, what even is succession planning and why does it matter? Why should we care?
It's a very good question. And to put it in the most simplistic way, and I think a lot of companies overthink it a little bit. It's really ensuring you have the right people in the right job today and in the future. And so, succession planning is usually targeted at maybe leadership succession planning, but really it's making sure that you have the right people in the right job at any moment in time. And that could mean a leader, that could be a principal engineer, and just making sure you have that right talent for every job that you have in your company.
And so if you want to get started, like where would you begin? Like what kind of steps are involved? How should someone get started in approaching succession planning at their company?
Yeah, it's funny. I just ran a big plan here at Skyline Construction Enterprises. So the timing of this is pretty impeccable, actually. And I have a bunch of leaders, honestly, that have never done it before. And I had to take a step back and say, how can I create this program that is not intimidating, makes sense to them and create success for them in their business? And what I did was I started with a very simple toolkit. There's three components. There's assess, there's identify, and there's develop. Assess is probably the harder piece of the entire succession planning process. The first thing that you would want to do is assess your company, assess your goals, your initiatives, basically running a business scan of your company or your division or your department, right? So you park those goals and initiatives that you're working on now and in the future. And then what you want to do is say, okay, what are the critical skills needed to succeed? What are the critical skills needed or talent needed to be able to meet those goals and initiatives? And then you park that on the side for a minute. Then you take an assessment of your team, right? So you look at, okay, now who do I have on my team or in the company that actually has those skill sets? and you kind of park those individuals over there. And then what you're doing is you're comparing. Here's what I just said that I need to be successful in these goals and initiatives, and here's my team. And what you create, what you're going to see is a skill gap. And the skill gap is really critical because what you've identified is what is missing in your entire organization or your team to be able to meet those goals, right? So you're starting to build your succession process in your planning. The next thing you would want to do is actually identify those people in your organization. You say, okay, maybe I have 4 people that actually have 50% of those skills. Can I develop them? Can I get them up to that skill set that I need to make sure that I have a backup plan for these different individuals or not? And when that aha moment happens, when you say, gosh, I have actually no one, this is when you have the HR person or the executive work together to come up with what that profile would look like. And this is when you start engaging people like a Tom, right? To help strategize, to look outside to say, here's my future leader, or here's my future person that I'm going to have to seek in order to meet my goals in my company. It's a process that starts very early. The process doesn't ever end. What I find is that people try to think that I'm going to create a succession plan, I'm going to have it, and then that's it. I'm going to park it. Succession planning is ongoing. It never stops. It should be part of your recruitment process. It should be part of your development process. It should be part of everything you do in your DNA in your company. So it's a very important process. And what we learned through our journey through the succession plan, we had a lot of aha moments that were very good. And one of the eye openers that I had was on the hiring practice. There's a lot of bias. You know, when you're trying to find someone with the skills that are missing in your company, you don't want to hire the person just like yourself. You're trying to hire better. You're trying to find those skills initiatives, those skills and talent that really will help you meet the company goals and protect the shareholders. So a lot of that a lot of that is very important to kind of introduce to the leadership, but also at any level. This is not about being fearful about exposing them on a skill they don't have. This is about what is best for the company and how do you protect the company overall.
Definitely. And so I imagine there's so much collaboration with leadership. What role does the CEO play in all of this?
Oh gosh, it's super, super important. If you don't have the executive buy-in or the executive commitment pushing this down as an initiative or a goal to your company, there's no wheels. It doesn't go very far, right? It means that it's just another task. But if you really are important about the succession planning and making sure you have the right skill and talent on your team and in the company at every moment in time, it's super important for business continuity. So think about it. If a president goes down, you know, who do we have to fill that role? A leadership strategic role. We haven't developed fast enough, right? So all of these things play a very important role as you start to develop your plans. But the CEO our CEO, which I applaud her for, she made this as a very strong initiative to all the presidents in our company. And what she did is we started this process back in probably March. And starting in November, she has asked all the leaders to present to the board. That's how important it is to our company to ensure that we protect our shareholder value, make sure that we have a plan for the future. We're an ESOP to protect our employee stock ownership plan, and make sure that all of us are have a company that's constantly going to be improving. But it also shows to the employees that it matters. It matters to them. It matters to us that we help groom them for all these potential positions as well.
Definitely. And you mentioned before how you reach a certain stage where you would want to bring in someone like Tom. So how can an alliance with an executive search partner like effectively bridge these talent gaps?
You build the relationships. Tom, you and I have worked together now for so long. And I think that the magic sauce between our relationship is that I can call Tom, and we built this relationship over time. He really understands my business. He understands every pulse, every position. He reads every description. He's very well read on my website, everything about the company. Anytime I call, I'll say, look, here's what I'm looking for. And here's the skill gap, because we ran the skill gap analysis. Here's what I'm missing in skill and experience in the team. Keep your eyes open. This is a partnership you develop. Talent teams, definitely do a great job. But when you're looking for very specific skills and very specific people or talent, it really does help to have a very good partner on your side. In the end, you're trying to do the best you can to make sure you find the best talent for your company. And not all the time the internal talent teams can do that. It doesn't mean they're not performing well. It just means that we need another set of eyes. They have a broader scope of the industry. They have a broader vision. They have a lot more network. Why wouldn't you want a partner? It makes me look good when I find people.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I do everything in my power to find the right people. I get kudos. At the end, I'm looking for that partnership to help me build the right team. And it does take a good partnership to do that.
Yeah, I concur. Working with Diane over time has just been a real learning experience, and I'm always surprised when I think we assume that executives coming on board and existing incumbent executives understand succession planning. And it's interesting when you're asked to hire an executive, you always ask, oh, do you have experience hiring? Have you scaled teams? But I think we could there's a lot of room for improvement to really work with executives to say, hey, what have you done? Like specific examples. What are your thoughts on succession planning? How have you done it before? Where have you led? Those types of things, because I see so much overhead being spent on going outside the market when there's existing talent that sits within the organization. And as a talent partner, we're often tempted, like it's a real thrill to kick off a search. You're really going to help the company find and complement skill sets. But I really think we recruiters have some room for improvement to ask those questions. Who on your team can do this, and help them? If an HR person like Diane isn't involved, help them sort of go through that exercise, because it's going to save a tremendous amount of time. It's going to garner so much trust, and it will be a co-journey with that other person. But I can only, unfortunately, name maybe a dozen or so executives that have it automatically. It's automatically intuitive for them to do this, and I think the joint partnership with HR and executive recruitment, it's a real advantage. And there's so many interesting things that we can do together that would be really helpful in this process. I mean, first of all, understanding the mitigation risks for unexpected leadership changes. We as recruiters should be really thinking about this when we see different things happen in the industry, and be proactive and reach out to respective leaders and help them think this through. I think that's the future of our role as TA people, and I'm betting that's going to be something that's going to really be talked about a lot more when we come out of this sort of period that we're in now.
Tom, you bring up an interesting comment too, is that the hard part for HR is, that you get a lot of pressure you have to backfill someone right away. And the hard part is, what I tend to do is ask, okay, there's today, but what about in the future? What are the skills are missing that we need now to make initiatives in the next year or two? Every leader knows what their initiatives are in year 1 or 2. If they don't, then that's another problem, right? But hiring just for the now doesn't work. Hiring for the future, and that's why succession planning is so important. You identify the things that you really need for the future. You identify the skill gaps in your department or division. And those are the things that you need to build into your hiring plan. And that's where, partnership is really important with like a Tom or an executive firm or a search firm. And again, succession planning isn't about just leadership. It's about every critical role in your company. It could be a principal engineer that holds all the product and understands all the nuances or code or whatnot for the company. That's a terrible miss if something happens to that person. So it's not just a leadership bench, it's a critical bench, the way I look at it.
Yeah. And Diane, I'm a big believer in it's the questions of how we sort of ask these things. What advice can you give search people and also other HR people to sort of bring up this topic of like how could we give to recruiters to intelligently ask these questions about how can they insert themselves in a professional way into the succession planning process or thinking if they're not an employee of the company? Any advice that you can give us in
You know,
terms of
it-
that conversation?
You know, I think what made you and I work so well together too, Tom, and in our journey of hiring, right, is the fact that you took the time and the patience to really understand the company, right? Really understand the technology, really understand the new, you asked all the right questions. We interviewing not just the head of talent, but what I do when people come in and if I'm looking for an executive, for example, I want to make sure they meet with all the critical players with this executive, right? Who would partner with this role? Because it's really important to hear the sound bites of other people in the company that would work with the role, right? What do they need? What do they want from this leader? What value add? What goals, what initiatives do these other individuals have that are really critical that this new leader must have so they can help them meet their initiative? I mean, all of these things play a role, but I think with partnership and the talent side, it's really important that they just really understand the business, the pain points, and those, and never be quiet about asking a question. I mean, just be curious. Look at our competitors, right? And that's another big thing. Look and read up on who are the top 3 competitors. I remember when you and I worked together, you asked, like, who are the top 3 competitors? It was a brilliant question, because what you do is you go to their websites and you figure out what do they have that we don't have.
Yeah.
You look at their profiles, right? But I think it's the more well-read, the more well-versed you are in the company and the dynamics, and asking those questions, it's going to just make you make you have that opportunity to get into the company and work with them. I mean, I look for people who really, I don't have to repeat myself. I don't have to teach them about what we do. They already know it. Otherwise, that I don't entertain them at all. I mean, if you don't take the time to even read the website or even my leadership profiles, why would I want to work with you? That's like step 1. But if you get to the point where you're dealing with the, HR executives, that's what they expect, right? They do expect you to have some understanding of the company, our technology, or our service, or our partnerships, reading the newsletters, and our top competitors and what they're doing, and how does this play a role in the search, right? All of that. Sometimes I learn a lot from the executive search firm, and I learn a lot about what I'm not doing, and that's brilliant. So it's not just about filling a role, it's about building that partnership, because you get repeatable business, right? Hence, we worked years together, Tom, and the reason for that is because I can come to you and trust you about everything and say, here's what I need in a CTO, or here's what I need, or here's what I'm missing. I don't understand this actually. What does this word mean? I mean, it's sometimes you guys have all the data and all the definitions, and we don't.
Yeah.
So it's a strong partnership, and I would say no question's a dumb question, and you have to get into the weeds of the definition and weeds of understanding, and the why they're hiring, and also be careful of bias. And it's okay to coach them, saying, well, it sounds like you're hiring yourself. Is that what you really want to do? Right? And I run into that all the time.
And I think that's true too. I think when we ask different executives, like, why did you choose to go to an executive search firm? And that common response is, oh, because we believe that they know the market. But then I say, well, what do you mean by that? Because most people are LinkedIn. So I have always challenged myself, and it's worked in my client's favor. I also think about the business model, because skills change all the time. And if you look at data and you look at the trends, I really think there's an opportunity there to say, hey, you're doing things this way, but is there a chance to sort of experiment with thinking and talking to this? I'm a big fan of strategic pipelining to cover both the business landscape, but importantly, the succession planning landscape as well. And that part I really, am a big believer in. It's also understanding the core businesses that are out there too. I'm always really, really impressed with companies that do things quite differently. They bring in talent from different parts of the world and places in order to strengthen that dynamic qualities. And I'll never forget, Diane, when I worked at Oracle years ago, one exec took me aside and shook me and said, I want a dynamic organization. I don't want everybody from this X school or whatever. And it really taught me a lesson that what diversity and a dynamic sort of workforce matters. And some of those leaders at Oracle now are CEOs of big companies, and they had a chance to experience that. And then in the day, they had great reputations for building great teams. So really learned early lessons on working with you. But I just, I think there's lots of opportunity for businesses, of course, for recruiting businesses, as well as the bottom line of companies, to really start with that question of like talent, like where do you expect? And I'm just wondering if you've had any surprises over time where you've talked with a C-level person, and what's that like to have somebody who's really experienced at it, and what's it like to have not somebody experienced at
Oh,
it?
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of, timing of succession planning is really important. You need their attention. And just to go back to what Madeline asked, the reason for executive buy-in is they have to believe in the process, right? And the importance of it. And it's very important to the CEO to make sure that they have the right skill and talent for business continuity and also achieving, the corporate goals, basically. But not every company is like that, right? So you have the startups, right? The startups are under a lot of stress to get people in just to scale. They're not thinking succession planning, right? They're butts in seats. Sorry, but that's the term, right? But I appreciate that. I think as you get to series, by the time they get to series D and F, they're starting a little bit think about it. So think about the journey that they're going through and the timing of that. They're not really thinking succession planning. The board may think of it, but only for the very top players, maybe. But overall initiative in a company is probably not till they get further along. And there's a reason for that, because right now they're rushing to get a product out or a service out or get funding. They just need people, right? So it depends on where the company is, the climate, the sophistication of the leadership team, and also the sophistication of the leadership team, realizing this is not about exposing a lack of skill in them or the team. This is about the best thing for the company. And it's all about timing. It happens to be a good timing for us. We're expanding in different regions. We're buying different companies. And to have a succession plan for our leaders is very important right now. And so I've been here 5 years, and we only just initiated this, in this year, just to give you an idea. It took that long to get it off.
Wow.
We were working towards it. I think the issue is, like every other company, you get side railed, you get another company to buy in, or you do something else. But what we stopped and thought about was we did lose a very good person on our leadership team that made us all stop and think that, wow, that could happen to anybody, right? And it takes a moment like that to realize if one departs or transitions or some other way, or becomes disabled, you realize there's a huge hole. And that was an aha moment for us to say, we really need to push the succession planning process up a little bit more and not have this, gap in our talent. We need to make sure that we don't have a gap in our talent, right? So I think timing of this is really important, and where the business climate is, it's not something to be rushed. It has to be thought out, but no matter where your journey is, eventually you have to have a succession plan, and it needs to be part of your hiring plan.
No, for sure. That's fantastic. And someone said something to me to my partner Will and I yesterday, and they said, before it was valuations of companies were being measured by numbers of people in the company, and that's why hiring, the theory that they hired so much. That's not the world we're going to see in the next 3 to 5 years. So it gets me to really get inspired about this role and this topic, as companies really have to think hard about planning. And I'm even wondering, ideating here out loud, should there be like a strategic sourcing sort of require, like every company has just somebody who does that type of thing and not new introduction. I know there are talent partners and so forth, but oftentimes they often get requested to do execution type roles. But I'm just thinking that's such an important thing, and I think it could even yield a lot more benefits the more focus put on it.
Internally, I think with HR and talent, executives, getting a seat at the table during strategic planning is really important. Hearing where they need headcounts, hearing the strategic changes in product or development, gives them insight of how they should plan strategically on how they hire for the future, right? And your talent team might differ. You know, you may need another specialty in talent. You know, if you don't have someone who specializes in engineering or in product management, well, that's where you look outside, right? To make sure you have the right search person outside to help you find those roles, which are very competitive roles, right?
Yeah.
So for internal purposes, for talent leaders or HR leaders to get that seat at the table at all strategic planning, which I have, I'm very fortunate. That gives me insight on how to plan for the future and how to support them, the presidents or the CEO, as they continue to build those types of initiatives. But everything is future, right? If you just hire for now, right, you got to be hiring for where your plan is. You know, if you know you got these initiatives coming up in 24, 25, you should be starting your hiring plan. It's hard, right? And it takes time, but these are the times where you constantly think of succession planning as part of your hiring process. You look for partnerships like with RFS, you know, and you know, you start to build your strategy.
Yeah, that's great.
And Tom, Diane, I did see a question come in and I've gotten a couple DMs. Are you guys ready for Q&A?
Sure.
Let's roll.
We had one come in. How do you do succession planning without making key folks feel like they're getting replaced?
Yeah, you know, very good question. It's so sensitive. I keep coming back to, you know, I turn it in a way that makes them successful. Not having the right talent on your team, you're failing. So at one point, you know, they're exposed. Having the right skill set on their team and having that, it's not about just them. It's about making sure that their goals and initiatives get completed if they transition. That is their responsibility. So I try to take it away from, it's not about, you know, exposing them and their lack of skill in some way, but, you know, turning it around in a way that, how can I help you be more successful? You know, let's look at this. There's always one that is super sensitive, and it's all about timing in that kind of conversation. If they lose a good person, that might be a timing when you dive in and you start to have a conversation about succession planning. Succession planning with the leadership, again, if you're looking at your top leaders, really needs the CEO buy-in or the top executive to make that a corporate goal, which mine did, which made my job a lot easier.
Definitely.
Right. So now I'm partnering with them and helping them build their plans. Right. It's not threatening.
Okay. We got another one. Are there any legal or ethical considerations that organizations commonly overlook in succession planning?
Oh, very good question.
Very good.
Very good question. Well, the goal of succession planning is, you know, we're not forcing attrition, right? So you got to be careful. You're not forcing attrition. You're trying to make sure that you have the right skill and talent at any time for any role, right? So legally, you don't want to make it look like you're forcing attrition in any way, right? Other than that, I can't think of it as a legal issue, right? It's all about how you approach the issue and making sure that this is a productive, you know, growth opportunity type plan, and it's not a threatening plan. I hope that answers the question.
We got another one. What's your perspective on promoting from within versus hiring external candidates for key leadership roles?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you always want to, but the reality is they're missing some skill gap because of the lack of development in the company, right? So what we've done is we're trying to do rotations. We want our L2s or our second in command to grow into these professional positions or the leadership positions. And we're building the leadership academy and trying to do that. And you may only have a select few, and that's okay. But, you know, we prefer to develop. But what we've realized through the succession planning, we have a gap. And so the timing is, it might take me another year to get these L2s to a point where I can actually get them trained enough to actually take president role, right? That doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means that you need to make sure, be very thoughtful and mindful in how you build those development plans. And it's an investment. It's
so
a
that's
big investment.
you factor that into the succession planning is the
Yeah.
potential of someone to be moved up into that role, trained on without having to go external.
Absolutely. I mean, succession planning is about building that next level, right? We talked a little bit about external because there's skill gaps and you don't have anybody. then you need to look external, and hopefully you partner with someone like a Tom or someone else that can help you fill that gap and find that profile. Ultimately, you always want to try to develop those people inside. That's what you want to do. You want to create that opportunity, and it would be lovely to have that next set of leaders come right from your own organization. But again, that the hard part is it's an investment, and you need that investment coming from the CEO or executive team. It should be in budgets. It should be developing a program that helps it's a constant development program. So it doesn't mean you throw them in a leadership 3-day program. This is about educating them along the way, going to sales calls, shadowing in an executive meeting, being participant in the building of the budget plan, have them own it. So all of these things have to come as a part of their learning process. So it takes time to develop that program. But of course, I think any company would prefer to hire if they have the right talent and skill ready. That's the goal of succession planning too, is developing that next set of leaders or critical people to fill critical roles.
Thank you. I've got 2 more in the DMs. What should or could startup founders do monthly or weekly regarding session planning in order to be successful?
Great question.
I think that in my eyes, the simplest ways to look at it is look at your initiative and goals, right? You remember we talked about that earlier, what we're doing now, what we need in the future, and doing that assessment across your team. What are the skills needed now and in the future? And you're building your succession plan towards that, right? What that means is that you may have some top players that you can actually develop and get those skills, right? But in the back of your mind, if the development doesn't happen fast enough, then those leaders need to decide, do I need to look externally to try to find a new set of skill set, to bring into the company? So it's an ongoing process. It should be part of your hiring plan. The skill gap analysis should probably be done once a year, every year. You're looking at your team, you're doing an assessment of your projects, your goals, your initiatives. Every year when you put out your goals and your initiatives, right? Then you should be doing assessment of your skills and talent needed to meet those goals. That's the assessment of your internal team, the assessment of the goals and initiatives that are new and what's missing. So every year we do that, every Q1, or that should be a kickoff in every meeting.
Awesome. And what are some of the most difficult roles to plan for or take the longest in your experience?
That's a good question. I think they're all hard.
All equally difficult.
They're all hard. Obviously the leadership roles are tough. I find that, we move so fast, we forget, we need to make sure that we're always taking care of and developing our leaders below us, right? And I think that's a tough one because a lot comes with that: strategic planning, people management, building your business, sales, business development. I find some of those are the hardest. But I think all critical roles are hard because they're critical. And, the fear of losing any one of those individuals in a critical role is tough. So, it's hard to answer that because I think it's different for every company. Engineering firms will probably have a much different perspective. I mean, losing your top product management person is really hard. Product management and engineering have to go together. Losing the top product management person is really tough.
I chime in. I concur. Product management, replacing your head product person is probably one of the hardest.
I think that's one of your hardest positions, right, Tom? I think that's what we've learned. I think it took me 9 months more sometimes to find that top player, right? So, but either way, I think all critical roles are very hard. They're hard. They're critical. That's why they're critical, right? You have top players, you have top skills, you've groomed them into the culture of the company. They know your software or product or service very well. They know your customers very well. I mean, I think, you have to look at that landscape, and those are the ones you need to focus on to make sure you have a good succession plan.
Awesome. We've got 2 more. How directly involved should a current leader be in the interview selection and onboarding process when identifying and grooming their successor? Pros and cons.
Great question.
Oh boy, you guys are killing me. How involved should the top leader or the hiring manager? Sorry.
It said, how directly involved should a current leader be in the interview interview, selection, and onboarding process when identifying and grooming their successor?
That's a good question. I would say it depends, if a leader is trying to step down or transition, which happens, right? So if you're a new startup and you're in a founder position and you need to step aside and let another VP of engineering or a new CFO or someone come in, I think it would be very helpful to have you involved, right? So the reason for that is you know the company the best, you know where the future is and what skills are needed and the talent and also the demeanor of the person and the sensitivities and the empathy that's going to be required in order to lead that position. So I think it just depends, but I do see that leader being involved in moments of the interview process, right? So I do think that, at one point that's probably pretty important.
Next, are there any books you recommend for an internal recruiter to learn how to navigate these conversations? Tom, you might have some recommendations too.
I have one I can recommend. I have one I'm reading right now. I don't know if you can see it. It's by Rich Devine called The Attributes. And why I got it and it was recommended to me is because this book is helping me understand the different drivers of what optimal executive performers are being asked for in this industry, at least the tech industry. And the more we're able to sort of speak to that and be sort of in our head, sort of internalize the different skills and we talk to these people, we then can become sort of the proactive communicators of these skills. And again, it's about, I'm always like amazed when I talk to execs and I say, look, just tell me about you. Like, just tell me a quick story and take me down, your history lane. And I am able to, if I'm able to repeat back to them their main executive attributes, I know I'm talking with someone that I can have an effective partnership with in representing them, because I need to understand that and then translate that to my client. So for example, if I know that the trending, it's all role specific for product engineering operations, what those things are, and I have done a good job to get to know an executive candidate, I can help the client connect the dots and let them know and bring to their attention, this is the assessment of this person. So I'm a big fan of reading anything about leadership. I'm also a big fan of really thinking through and refreshing our ability to ask great questions, because the more intelligent questions we ask execs, and there's a book that I'm reading, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. I've read it a few years ago. I'm reading it again, because the way that you answer questions and disarm a candidate, the more they're going to reveal and allow and let you help them assess them in such a way where there's alignment, because at the end of the day, it's all about alignment. Business needs now may not be aligned to executives, and it's up to us to think about the alignments that are out there and help those dots get connected. So I'm hopeful that I'm on target there. But any book on leadership or attributes for a recruiter, I think, are essential. And also that book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. I think it's one of the best books I've ever read.
And I'm happy if anyone wants to ping me individually to share what I did at Skyline Construction in the beginning to the end, and where the presidents are about to present to the board. I'm happy to give you my playbook and show you. There's so much out there. What happens, you get overwhelmed. There's so much material on succession planning. It's overwhelming. And I truncated my playbook down to the most simplistic way, so it's not threatening and it's easy, and it allows them to think pretty clearly about how to set up their succession plans. And I'm happy to provide that to anybody on the call today.
Fabulous. We still have time because we're getting more questions, guys. And the next one's really good. In your experience, what is the common reason succession planning fails?
It's not continuous. It stops. For some reason, no matter where you go through in your journey in your company, it should never stop. It should be revisited every year or maybe more, right? Every time you're hiring someone, you should look back on your succession plan and look at, am I hiring towards what my future goals and initiatives are and the skill gaps that I've already identified? I think it fails because the wheels come off, or the executives, are not engaged. It's not a corporate goal. But succession planning is continuous. It never stops. It should never just be something that is a goal for 1 year and not the next. It should be going on constantly. And that's what we're building into the Skyline plan. It is an initiative for everybody's corporate goal going forward.
I want to interrupt. Do you track and measure, like a way to track and measure a successful succession planning? Whether times that it's gone great and time that it's kind
a
of like.
Good point. We're just starting this process, but I think ultimately is the success of the businesses meeting their goals in a timely manner, right? So the skills and the things that are necessary to meet their initiatives, and that's kind of one way to measure it. But we're developing that now. But I think there's a lot of metrics that you can use. In another way, it's just looking at what they've established as their initiatives and their skill gaps, and making sure that the recruitment team is hiring towards those skills, right? So there's some measures there that you can do internally. Again, we're in the process as well. It's developing those types of metrics right now and how to plan to make sure that they're successful. But in the end, it's really that leader owns that, and that is their performance is based on that and how they succeed in the overall department. I'm not going to measure their performance as a person. I'm going to measure the success of the talent coming in and making sure we're meeting the goals and getting the right skills in for them.
Great. Thank you.
We'll post it here. What is the best way to contact each of you? If anyone has follow-up questions or wants to get some advice, how can they reach you guys?
Tom has my contact, but I will give it to you right now. It's pretty simple. Rigatuso at skylineenterprises.com. Feel free to email me there anytime. Or LinkedIn.
Tom at recruitingfromscratch.com.
Or LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can link a question or a message to me anytime. Just refer to this call so I know where you're coming from. I get a lot of messages.
And I believe this has been recorded, so this will have, if anyone wants a copy, feel free to ask us.
Yeah, we'll be posting this to our LinkedIn too. So if you go to the Recruiting from Scratch LinkedIn, you'll be able to find it there. But awesome. Thank you everybody for hopping on.
It's been great.
Informative and everything you were looking for. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Tom. This was wonderful. Thanks for sharing all of your expertise. It's been awesome.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody. Great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.